Israel, you know? I mean, I was so pissed off at my parents for moving, and then I came back by myself without them to finish senior year of high school and felt like I didn't really belong in the United States anymore. So, just something that I still feel, you know? You know, if you add, my parents got divorced in Israel. My little brother David was like 12 or 13 years old and sort of exposed to that. I was in the States with this progressive disease, which at the time could have been masked by like partying a little bit too hard or whatever. I mean, it's the United States. Basically, every teenager is surrounded by substance abuse all the time. God, now that I have kids, I'm like, it feels a little bit weird saying that out loud, but it's really the truth. And I was by myself, senior year of high school. My parents were in the middle of getting divorced in Israel. And, you know, when you are becoming sort of an active drug addict, it's a perfect scenario, you know, because I could basically do whatever I wanted and sort of find an excuse to behave the way that I did. So I ended up somehow getting into college by the grace of God, you know. I remember my aunt calling the admissions people at University of Vermont and basically begging to allow me in. And I had decided, I was an art person, and I had gotten a partial scholarship to Rhode Island School of Design, which was like #2 in the country. I went to visit my friend Zach in University of Vermont, took Adderall for the first time and LSD, and I was like, I gotta go to college in Vermont, you know? And, you know, UVM at the time was the most expensive out-of-state school. My mother was a teacher, my dad was a jeweler, and then owned Subway sandwich franchise. So basically, spent the first, I spent 3 semesters of my parents' hard-earned money taking drugs and dealing drugs and snowboarding occasionally, and I ended up overdosing and went to rehab and had to call my parents from a payphone in rehab in Israel as they were middle of divorce and tell them that I had to drop out of school because I had almost died. And then when I was on the phone with my mom, I was like, I got a tattoo, click, you know?
Because that's what you do when you go to Israel.
It was like, no, it was in the States, but I was like, this is the best opportunity for me to tell her that I got a tattoo. And so my mother, just divorced from my father, after moving to Israel 2 years prior, flies to Brattleboro, Vermont to make sure that I'm okay because her son almost died. And I was immersed in drug activity. I was addicted, I was behaving as an addict. I'd almost died from an overdose, and I was also dealing a lot of drugs, and there was this big event that involved a lot of my friends from Pittsburgh that were meeting some friends in Vermont, and I was so wrapped up in it that while my poor mother was visiting me, I still couldn't really disengage, right? It was that important to me. And my friend Ed, who I had known from Pittsburgh for years and years, who I had arranged this interaction, this drug deal with my friends in Vermont, while my mother was visiting me to make sure I was okay, because I almost died. He asphyxiated on the way back and died in his sleep. And so I ran away to Israel.
How old were you at this point?
I was 19 years old. And I walked up and down the Rehov Weitzman in Kfar Saba, and I found a bakery. Because I was an art major with really shitty Hebrew, so I had like no skills, right? And I got a job working in this bakery and really loved it. I loved like the hard work. I loved doing something honestly. I mean, I had been making more money than my parents selling drugs. And I got to really bust my ass scrubbed dishes, learned Hebrew, learned to get sweared at in 13 different languages. And, you know, in Israel, a bakery is basically City Hall, right? Because people eat baked goods 5 times a day. And on Shabbat, on Yom Shishi, it's where everybody goes. And religious or not religious, everybody eats challah. And I was so used to taking from people and just consuming and manipulating. This was like the opposite. I was getting paid like 6 shekels an hour, which is basically free. And I was working harder than I'd ever worked before. And I was doing something that was productive. I mean, this sounds really cheesy. This is still the reason that I cook. I remember the chalot. I remember giving it to people to be part of their ceremony. And it was just incredibly powerful. So I started cooking. I really loved it. I got a job working as a short order cook up the street.
Wait, can we go back to the bakery just 1 second?
Yeah.
When you were working in the bakery, were you still using at that point?
No, so that's the thing. Back then in Israel, the weed was terrible. And I also was the first time in my life that I was like, I was scared, you know? It wasn't just that I'd almost died, it was that like, it felt like there was this permanent, like the light was out, you know? And I think that a lot of people that go through recovery right before the end, right before you hit rock bottom, it's like the sun never really comes out. And that feeling of just not being able to look at myself in the mirror. My friend Ed dying, and the idea that my mother, you know, just did everything right, just did the best she could. Both my parents did the best they could, and was just, you know, I didn't like who I was, and so I didn't think I was a drug addict. I just thought that I'd like partied a lot. I was just very good at getting high, right? And so when I moved back to Israel, there wasn't drug culture that I was really, I didn't make enough money, first of all, to purchase any drugs, but also I was just working all the time. It wasn't really part of who I was, and drinking was never really my thing, so no, I didn't really use. And it felt great, you know, and then I became a short order cook, and I really loved it. And I decided to go to culinary school in West Palm Beach, Florida, another suburb of Tel Aviv. And my family was excited that I wasn't, you know, in jail or worse. And I had found something that I kind of loved. And so I went to Florida and I cooked, and I really loved, like it was the first time in my life where I actually felt like I was good at something, you know?
Now, when you overdosed that time, I don't know if that was the only time or the first time or whatever, did your parents have any clue that you were in a stage in life that something like that could happen?
No, my parents had no idea, and we were living on different continents at the time. And again, you know, I was like in university school and college. I hadn't gotten arrested. I hadn't gotten kicked out of school. So there was no way for them to know, right? And I think that also, like, had they been living in the States, it might have been different, but I was really good at lying. Really, really good at lying. Like, I deserve Emmys, okay, for lying. And I think all of us that have gone through this know exactly how to manipulate, exactly how to pull on the heartstrings of those that care about us, and to do it until you just can't, you know? So, I don't know. I mean, I partied a little bit when I got back. I did not deal drugs, and I felt like I was like almost as addicted to that as anything else. And my career, you know, I was very serious about what I was doing, and people really liked that. It's amazing when you take all the energy that you spend using or lying or whatever, and you put it into something. It's like you can do whatever you want, you know? You can freestyle with Fat Joe, Rami, right? It's unbelievable what we can do, right? And so I moved to Philadelphia because it was quite literally on the way to New York, and I was like, this seems very nice. I got a job working at a restaurant called Striped Bass, which was like the lower end of Philly. I got a job working at Vetri Restaurant, which is an Italian restaurant. And while that was happening, my little brother David went to middle school in Israel, high school, and then enlisted in the military like everybody else and became an infantry soldier and sniper in a Golani brigade. And right before his release, I was at Vetri and we took a break in August. It was a very Italian restaurant to the point that they would actually close for part of August, which is not what any American chef would ever do. My mother said, Michael, you haven't been home in a while, I'm gonna buy you a plane ticket. And David, who's almost done, you get like a little vacation right before you release. It coincides with David vacation. You're gonna cook dinner for my friends, and I'll fly you over. And I was like, sure. And I thought it would be 5 of her friends. She'd invited 40 people over 2 nights. And David and I had not lived on the same continent in years. And we had this amazing time. Actually, speaking of Fat Joe, there's this song that was like on repeat basically in the radio. You know, what's love got to do, you know? So we would drive up and down the coast, shopping for ingredients. It was the first time that I visited Israel with the lens of a chef. I had hung out with my little brother who had the same silly mannerisms, and it was just incredible. And the food was pretty awesome, if I say so myself. And we cooked these amazing dinners. And you know, I had sort of rediscovered my best friend, and I remember hugging David when I left. And he was going to finish the military and then come to school in the States. And he was all embarrassed, and my mom was like so happy. And I came back to the States, got promoted to sous chef, which is a really big deal, and was driving my father's car that he had left in the States for my brother from Pittsburgh to Philly on Yom Kippur. And I was in Lebanon, Pennsylvania, or Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and my aunt called me and said, you have to call me when you get home. You know, and I was like, what's going on? And I don't know what I thought. I pulled the car over on the side of the road, and I was like, Aunt Ava, what is going on? She was like, David was killed earlier today, and he was patrolling in Metula and was killed by Hezbollah snipers that had shot through the border, and he was killed in an apple orchard. And I was like, this can't be happening. He was supposed to be released like 3 days later, and turns out that he had actually shouldn't have even been there. He'd switched with somebody that wanted to observe and be in shul. So it was just a lot of stuff, and you know, I'd just seen him, so I was like, there's no way this could be happening. And I somehow drove back to Philly, and I was like, I just need to like go to sleep, and when I wake up, this nightmare is gonna be over, you know? And so of course I woke up, and I was like, you know, ended up going to the airport, and there were all these like different sort of like stages of denial that were getting shattered, you know? And so I get to the airport, and I see my whole family there, and everybody's sobbing, and then we go to get on the plane, and El gives out newspapers, and on the front page is a picture of my brother on a stretcher, basically, with his face blurred out, and I was just like, this can't be happening to me. And, you know, and then I get on the airplane, and I'm like, I just, you know, I don't even think at that point I believed in God or afterlife, but I was like, if in the event that the plane crashes and there is an afterlife, maybe, just maybe, I'll be able to tell David, you know, how much I loved him, right? And I was okay with that. So, and then we land, and then it's like, there's all the obituary notices everywhere, and I was like, God damn it, this is like actually happening. You know, and my dad, and we go to like, we bury him, and all the kids that I met on the beach at the discotheques were all in uniform, basically put him in the ground. And, you know, right before they let us view his body, and in retrospect, okay, so that's the worst thing that's ever happened to me. From the addiction standpoint, it was the best possible scenario, right? And I remember.
Well, why was it the best
possible scenario? Because for the addiction, that is literally haunting every single person that is a drug addict or alcoholic. It is just waiting for a reason. And what better, David was killed on Yom Kippur. David was the good one. I was the shitbag. David was the good one that endured moving to Israel at the age of 12, dealing with my parents by himself when my parents divorced, making it, through public education in Israel and being this amazing soldier that everybody loved and was killed on Yom Kippur. And for somebody that is a drug addict, that is fucking gold. That is gold. So I come back from his funeral and immediately pick up crack cocaine. Immediately. Like, it was just the easiest thing to do. It was like riding a bike for me. And if anybody ever questioned my behavior, my brother was killed on Yom Kippur. And so I learned very quickly that you can manipulate dead people, right? The way that you could manipulate life, and there was nobody, and then, in terms of the cycle of addiction, I felt terrible because I was smoking crack in my dead brother's car, lying to everybody about it, and that would just continue the cycle. Now the issue, Eve, is that on the outside, I was working at the best restaurant in Philly. I'd met my wife at the time, my business partner Steve, opened a restaurant. I remember the first restaurant that he hired me at. Steve, whose wife Shira went to the same Solomonov projector school in Pittsburgh that my mother taught at, of course, because Jewish geography is still the strongest bond that exists. And I remember, I was like, the issue with crack is that it's not often used recreationally, right? So I had all these games that I would play, right? All these scenarios where I'm like, I'm not an addict because of this, right? And I remember one day at this restaurant, Marigold, which was my first chef's job. I was like, I think I actually need help because this is out of control. And this article comes out in the Philly magazine. And the first line of this says, remember the name Michael Solomonov. And I was like, you know what, I'm good. I'm gonna keep this going. And it was you couldn't argue because my career was great. We were getting all this notoriety. I met my business partner, I met my wife, I got married, all these things. And then at night, I would drive around and get high in my dead brother's Hyundai Accent for 8 hours. And if anybody ever questioned my behavior, I always did blame it on my brother.
So you blamed it on your brother's death?
I blamed it on my brother's death. Right. And there was immediate shutdown.
And of course. And on the outside, everybody thought, I assume your family and everybody thought that life was great for you because you had success. Did they know what was going on behind?
They had no idea what was going on. My wife had no idea at the time. My business partner had no idea at the time. My parents lived in a different country and were just happy that I was doing something productive. And, they had, it was like a little pride situation also too. They could set their Google alerts. I mean, there was all the indications that things were going really well.
Right. It is amazing when you're an addict on the outside. I mean, I remember with Isaac how lying came so easy to him. I remember one time he walked out of my bedroom holding $100 bill. And I said, where'd you get that? You just took that from me. And he said, no, I didn't. And I was like, where'd you get it? He's like, I don't know, I had it. And it was didn't even realize what he was doing. I mean, it was just, it became so natural. And I'm sure, and also hiding it just becomes a way of life.
It was a double life, and it was something that I was the most comfortable doing. And if I ever felt morally, ethically, this is a really bad thing, putting every single person I know in danger, manipulating the memory I have of my brother, all those things, I could open the door for an elderly person or have an intellectual conversation or be nice to somebody, right? I remember this was before Zahav at this restaurant, I would always forget I had to get lemons or whatever, and I'd disappear for 2.5 hours, right? And I remember being at the grocery store in West Philadelphia on 44th and Walnut, buying like 5 lemons, right? It was a block and a half away from the restaurant. I was gone for like 2 hours, right? And I saw somebody that I knew from like the industry. We were sitting and talking, and I was checking out, and the woman in front of me that was elderly and was trying to like pay for this big, grocery order with like a Snap card or something, and it wasn't working, and she didn't know what was going on, and I was like, gave the credit card, and I remember the cashier was like quiet and was like, I could recognize that she had, what I had done was like a really nice thing, and the person that I was with was like, wow, he's a really good person. And then I was like, I'm gonna go out there and get fucking high right now, right? And it was like every single thing was a reaction to that or a way to use and to manipulate,
But it doesn't mean you weren't a good person just because you were using it you could still be a good person, and I'm sure that you
I'm a wonderful person, and I'm very proud of who I am. If I have 1 line of cocaine right now, if I have 1 drink, or if I start lying, you better watch out. Right? You better stay far away from me, because I will do whatever it takes to continue to use, and I will not stop. And that's just how it goes, and it's an insidious thing. And so we opened Zahav restaurant, right? And I decided that I would start using heroin to smoke less crack, which is rational. And so a week later, I'm addicted to crack and heroin, because with opioids, as we all know, it takes like a second, especially if you have an addictive personality. And then I had a hard time sort of hiding it, right? Because I started doing things that I'd never really done before, like showing up very late to work, or like I'd put myself and my wife at the time into like $40,000 of debt, and she was like, where are these bills? And I had great excuses. I mean, same thing as Isaac. I could make you believe whatever you wanted, and but eventually it sort of wore out. We ended up taking a trip to Bermuda, and I got really sick, and it was like a nightmare. And so I woke up one morning, and my wife was like, you need to come downstairs right now. And I go downstairs, and it's like my business partner and another one of our chefs who had gotten clean from methadone like 10 years before. And I was like, oh shit, I know what this is. I've seen this on TV. And we were living in South Philadelphia at the time, and so I immediately, in my bathrobe, just make a beeline for the backyard, which was a 10 by 10 concrete cat urine kind of thing. And I was just sitting there smoking cigarettes, and I was like, ugh, I just don't, my wife came out and she was like, listen, we want to take you to detox. Will you go? And I was like, weighing my options. It was either stop lying for the first time in my life, or jump the fence. And I wouldn't have been like the only crackhead in a bathrobe in South Philly at the time. Like it was close. And I was like, I wanted to not lie anymore. I just couldn't do it anymore. The burden of the lying I didn't want to do. And so I told her, again, it felt like the first real thing I'd ever said in my life. I said, I'm a drug addict and I need help.
Wow.
And it was like, and then...
But what brought that on was the intervention? Do you think you would have told her otherwise? Or would
I was at the period where there was like this permanent midnight darkness all the time, and I wanted to die, I wanted to die, and I felt like all I was doing every day was apologizing to my brother and lying to people and hurting people, and I just didn't have the energy anymore. I was surrendering, and so I went to rehab, and detox, and then rehab for 10 days, and then I came out, and it was not an easy, I'd slipped a couple times. I mean, doing inpatient is great. When you come out of inpatient is when it gets really hard. We're not programmed to ask for help. There was I didn't know that Jews smoked crack, you know? We didn't talk about that at JCC dances. And I also didn't know, it was this weird shit, like in rehab, they're like, cigarettes make you sick, but this is anonymous. But, you can't make any changes in the first year, but you should definitely not be in the restaurant business. And I'm like, I own restaurants, like I don't know what I'm supposed to do here. And then it was like 12-step stuff, and I was like, I was comfortable smoking crack and doing heroin in my dead brother's car, but if I read the word God, I was deeply offended. And so, I remember arguing with one of the drug counselors at in the morning, this guy Joe, and he was like, well, you gotta stop drinking too. And I was like, fuck that, you're drinking? No, I don't have a problem with drinking. And he was like, well, how often would you drink? I'm like, well, I drank every time I got high. He was like, well, how often did you get high? I was like, 8 times a day. And he was like, you're arguing with the drug counselor at 7 o'clock in the morning about why you shouldn't drink. Maybe you have a problem. And I was like, all right, that's fine. Yeah, that's okay. So, but I left. So here's the thing though, you get out and you're like, triggers, which is everything, which is oxygen, which is sunlight, which is whatever. If you're an addict and alcoholic, you have used in every single possible scenario. So there isn't one corner in Philadelphia where I have not scored, right? It's 100 square miles. I've scored on every single block. And the last time that I had the obsession to use, I had a really rough, it took me a really long time to get to 60 or 90 days. And I remember the lying stopped working. I couldn't lie anymore. I was called on my shit. My business partner, Steve, after finding out that his business partner, who had recollateralized our homes together, was hiding a crack addiction. And my wife found out that I was hiding this addiction. My business partner would pick me up every day from a 12-step meeting and drive me in to work, and then my wife would pick me up and drive me home because I couldn't be by myself. And I remember getting money to get a haircut, and I got this $20 bill in my pocket that my wife had given me, and I walked. It was at night, right? Which is, when you work in restaurants, you aren't usually out at night, right? The only reason I would be out at night was to score. And so I'm walking down Pine Street in Philadelphia with $20, and I was like, I'm gonna relapse. And my wife's gonna throw me out of the house, my business partner is gonna throw me out of the business, which is fine, right? And, I walked by this dental office that had a cleaning crew, and I was like, I'm gonna break into this place when I get thrown out. I had never stolen from a business that wasn't, I hadn't stolen from my business yet. I definitely would have, but I definitely haven't I didn't steal, I didn't trespass or any of those things. But I was planning this out, it was gonna happen. It was all because I had $20 in my pocket and I was gonna use. And I somehow got past the corner where I thought I was gonna make this call. And I sit down at this hair salon and I burst into tears. The lady's like, what do you want me to do with your hair? And I just started crying. And I tell her this story. I start sobbing, and I was like, here's the deal. I think I'm gonna use, I'm gonna relapse, I'm gonna get thrown out of my house. I can't make it past 60 days. I don't know why I'm having such a hard time. And she was like, I'm celebrating 11 months sober today. You're in the right place. And I think that saved my life, that moment.
Well, I was going to ask you that question. At what point, what is it that finally got you to the point where you realized there was no, it become so unmanageable?
So the last time that I relapsed was at Zahav, and my drug dealers were happy to hear from me. They showed up, and I got high in the office, and the moment that I came out of the office, a host comes back and it's like, this guy Steve, is here, and it was my sponsor checking in on me. And I was like, God damn